Hey, everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I'm so blessed and honored to be here with our friend, Brandon Tabassi from Remax Partners Relocation out of Boston. What's up, Brandon? How's it going?
Ben, it's always a pleasure to see you, man.
It's good seeing you too. I feel like I was just in Boston. I was just with you. You threw a magnificent party. Thank you so much for the hospitality.
We had a great time. We really did.
And we're back now because
And
bigger
we're
news
back now.
than WERC in Boston, which was big news.
Yes, we have some news coming. That's right.
Real estate is going bananas. Last week, I saw all sorts of headlines coming out that were kind of confirming and substantiating rumors that I was hearing around the future of buyer broker commissions. Everybody's losing their minds around this topic right now. I don't know what to think. I'm a future buyer. I don't know if I'm excited. I don't know if I'm fearful. I'm all confused. I'm drinking too much these days. I don't know what to do with myself. Brandon, you got to make light of it for us here. We got people checking in right now. Hit that like button. Get in the comments if you know real estate, if you can spell RMC. Get in the comments here. I want to know what your thoughts are on these developments that are happening. Brandon's going to give us the overview. We got people checking in. What's up, Shane Burlinson? Hey, guys.
Hey, Shane.
Hey, Shane. Not to be outdone, Annie Ream. Hey, hey.
Hey, hey.
I like to try to read it like they say it. Hey, guys, checking in from Global HQ. What's up, Adrian Grimes? It's balmy outside. It's balmy in the studio, too, here. Look at this. It's all balmy. Hit that like button. I want to know what's going on out there. What do you think about what's happening with real estate right now? We got a bunch of people checking in. This is great. Hey, y'all, people are getting in this thing here. Jonna Edgar, David Yakum. Fantastic.
Good people.
Brandon, give us an overview. Catherine saying what's up here.
Hey, Catherine. Hey.
This is fantastic. Adrian saying you can't have my house right now. 2.9% interest rates sounds kind of nice. Scott Gannon, glad to be listening. Don Keller, go Sox. Go Sox. Go Rangers. Don.
Go Sox. Go Sox.
Look at this. Susie Chapman, glad you got the subject matter expert to join your webcast. Looking forward to Brandon's insights.
Thanks, Susie. Always.
Annie Ream, HQ in the house. Scott Canary. This is great. Keep getting in there.
Hey, Scott.
Put your comments and questions in there, okay? We are going to prioritize those as well as you people who are celebrating your 2.9% interest rates, okay? You too will be celebrated today. This is great. But Brandon, catch us up. What's going on?
So, Ben, I think in order to understand these lawsuits, it's really important to understand the history of it, right? So I'm going to go back. I'm going to talk about the 5 lawsuits that brought us here. I'm going to talk about some key definitions. Okay. And once we go through these lawsuits, then I think we can understand the future implications of these. I think we can understand the current implications of these. And I think we can understand about what is an industry we can do to get ahead of this, because it's all about communication, right?
Mobility. All right, we're not reading writs here, right? We're just going to give people high level, right?
We're going to give people a high level, Ben, always.
All right,
always.
All right, cool. Because we're not like the lawyers. We don't charge by the hour, okay? We
don't get a 40%. No, we don't. We don't get 40% of hundreds of millions either. No. All
right. Give us that update on what's going on as far as the lawsuits. Take us back.
So it's important to understand some key definitions before we go into any of this, right? Okay. So let me start at a high level. So National Association of Realtors, largest trade association in the United States.
Wow, I did not know that.
Over 1.5 million members, been around since 1908. Okay, that's a key definition. National Association of Realtors.
And what's interesting that I have learned is in order to be a realtor, which is a trademark, you have to be a member of NAR, National Association of Realtors. Is that correct?
That's right. You can be a real estate broker like myself. You can be a real estate licensee, which is all the agents that work for me that service or transferees. But in order to be a realtor, you need to be a member of the National Association of Realtors. That's
okay.
Exactly
Cool.
Right. National Association of Realtors owns 97% of MLSs. So MLSs are multiple listing services. These are the services where listings are listed on here and co-broking happens, meaning you have one agent who represents a buyer, you have one agent that represents a seller. You're creating a competitive marketplace where these listings get more views, they get more traffic, they get more people interested.
Sure.
And as a result, the buyers get representation. So this is through MLSs.
So I didn't realize the MLSs were owned by NAR as well.
97%. Yep.
Wow, they really got their
3%
hooks in. Okay, cool.
Now, also in order to understand this, you need to know that MLSs have been around since the 1960s. So in the early 1900s, you did have various agencies. Agencies had their own inventory. So you had a buyer that was interested. They would go from agency to agency. Now, co-broking started way before MLSs started. So MLSs were sort of the answer to this, right? They were the answer to what was going on. So that's a key definition. Another key definition to understand is the judicial process, the process of coming up with a settlement. So settlement and class action suits need to be certified and they need to be approved by a judge. That's also very important to understand here. A settlement agreement can happen anytime in the judicial process. It doesn't have to be before a verdict. It can come, after a verdict in order to prevent an appeal from going through. So appeals, especially in a federal case, these can take many years. So the first thing everybody needs to know is that this process is a multi-year process. That's the first thing I want to kind of get out here. Now, in order to kind of take a step back and say, where are we now and how did we get here?
Yeah, where are we in this multi-year process, though?
Yeah. So a lot of these lawsuits, they started in 2019. It started with NAR versus Department of Justice. Okay. Now, this was the first one. This involved the Department of Justice investigating buyer broker compensations and a competitive marketplace.
Okay.
NAR and the Department of Justice in 2020 settled this. Okay. They agreed to settle this together. That there's going to be some rule changes. You may have noticed that in 2020, when you went on online sites, you went on Zillow, you went on any of these online sites, you started seeing what the buyer broker compensation was. So this was the answer to this inquiry. Administration.
So a little bit more transparency. They're starting to disclose who's getting compensated what on the transaction. Okay.
100%. So now when you send buyers a listing sheet, it also includes on it what the buyer broker compensation is. Everybody should know. So it was disclosure and at the time, the Department of Justice was happy with this.
So let me understand this. So if I send out a listing, I'll just pretend listing. If I send out a listing, it's going to say on here, I as a seller am willing to pay 3% to a buyer broker.
That's exactly right.
Now, as a seller, am I in this time period of 2020, hypothetically, am I able to say 1% is the buyer commission on this home at that time?
Ben, you had the ability in 2020 to say that you were offering 1 penny. Okay. So there is no such thing as a fixed commission. There is no such thing as a rate that you need to offer. It can be as low as 1 penny, right?
And traditionally, I'm understanding that the typical, traditional, widely accepted, whatever word you want to use, compensation is something like 3% to the buyer's agent, 3% to the seller's agent, paid by the seller. Is that what typically happens?
Yeah, I wouldn't say typical. I would say that's common. I would say the common, just like everything has a common rate, right? So, you go to the store, you buy a gallon of milk, that has a common rate. You buy eggs, that has a common rate, depending on which eggs you get, right? So some eggs might be a little bit more expensive. The organic,
those Whole Food eggs, you know what I mean?
Right.
Paying $10 a dozen on those things.
On some of them you do. On other ones, you don't. You're absolutely right. So just like that, if you look in an MLS, you look in any MLS, you see that buyer broker compensations vary. They vary across the spectrum. There's no such thing as a fixed commission. you were able to offer whatever you want. However, it needed to be 1 penny or more, okay, in order to be listed in these MLSs. Now, NAR has since reversed its stance to say that the interpretation of this rule is you can also offer 0. So the difference is that now, instead of offering 1 penny, you have the option of offering 0. A 1 penny difference for what you were able to do before. But that also the seller
Well,
agent.
it's a small difference from 1 penny to 0, but it's a big difference in principle because I think that 1 penny would probably rarely be offered. It's more the principle of, say, going probably from 1% to a 0 and say, I'm not offering nothing.
Yeah, I
But
mean, 1 penny is
doesn't
symbolic.
yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't symbol yeah, but doesn't that materially impact how many how the agents are frankly incentivized to show your property to attract buyers to it?
You bring up a really good point, Ben, which
Try.
is that, you know, here's the thing. All of these now, aside from full service agencies such as My Remax, there's
Mhm.
always been discount brokers. Okay, so you can pay someone $500 to list your house in MLS. You can pay a buyer's broker 1 penny in order to list your house on MLS. However, in order to get the traffic that sellers may want, they have gone with these rates that are common. They're
Common.
common because everything is common. So every certain salaries are common, certain costs are common, and those costs are common, especially in an industry such as this, based on the work going into it, right? The support staff that's supporting that listing, the support, the buyer's time, the buyer broker's time that they're putting into that transaction, the buyer agent's time. So they've always had an ability to negotiate this, just like anything is negotiable. Real estate agents have always had the ability to negotiate their commission. Buyers and sellers have always had the ability to negotiate buyer agents commissions.
Okay, I want to stop you right here because we got people checking in. I want to give shout outs here. Also, if you've got something to add to the conversation, we've got really smart people here. We've got Gary Connerly checking in. We've got Scott Gannon. We've got Tim Nowak here checking in.
Thanks,
John
Tim.
Sfara, what's
Hey,
up?
John.
Jason Hall's usually got an opinion. Janet Turner, hello, fine
Hey,
gents.
Janet.
Hey, thanks, Janet. I got dressed up for this. Let's see here. Yeah, so if you got an opinion about this, I want to hear it. Please get involved in the conversation. Ask the question that I don't know enough to ask of Brandon. Let's get the conversation started here. Okay, Brandon, we're caught up. So we've always had the ability to change these things. So what's happened?
100%. Well, nothing's happened. You've always had the ability to negotiate commissions. You're going to continue having the ability to negotiate commissions. But in 2020, NAR, Department of Justice, settled. In July of 2021, Department of Justice came back and they said that they want to reopen this. Okay.
So they
said,
settled it. Usually when you settle something, it's settled.
correct. And that's why in 2023, a federal court ruled that this was settled, right? So Department of Justice is now appealing that. However, they came back. The federal court said you already agreed to settle this issue. So that's one thing, Ben. One thing is the Department of Justice's inquiry into buyer broker commissions and this disclosure. But the other court cases that kind of bring us to where we are now are Sitzer Burnett. That is the court case that last week, this is kind of what brought everyone's attention back to this, right?
Yeah,
It was
this
the
is a
verdict.
big deal. Last week, I started getting all these push notifications on my Apple News, Wall Street Journal, this, New York Times, that, everything. I'm like, are they targeting me because I'm in the relocation space, or is this just that big of a deal?
This is true, Ben. Absolutely. So Sitzer Burnett last week, the jury came back with a verdict. There was also another court case called Merle that involves more than 20 MLSs. So Sitzer Burnett, it's important to understand, this only involved home sellers in the state of Missouri. This other court case that's going to be tried in 2024, Merle, this involves sellers in 20 plus MLSs across the country. So not every state, but many more states than Merle, than Sitzer.
So
Merle
Sitzer
is,
was Missouri, Merle
yeah,
is 20. And
20
of
MLS.
those 20, are they states that we, are particularly important?
Every state's important, Ben, but
Only if you're in it.
only if you're in it. So I can grab that list, but it's all across. It's in the Mountain West, it's in the
Okay.
Mid-Atlantic region, it's in the
Okay.
South, it's many states and many
Okay.
MLSs. Another very important case is Nasalic. Nasalic was a case against MLS PIN. Okay, so it was against sellers against MLS PIN. MLS PIN is the largest MLS in New England, my region, based in Massachusetts. This court case was settled, and it was offered to be settled. The plaintiffs, so the people bringing forth the suit, and the defendant, MLS PIN, agreed to settle this. A federal judge, Patty Saris, agreed to this settlement. And the Department of Justice came in and they asked to delay this decision of this final decision on this court case. Thanks, John. Until March of 2024. But we need to, in order to understand how all of this, hey, Drew, in order to understand how all of this is going to shake up, Ben, we need to look at these settlement agreements because on all of them, okay?
Why?
Because on all of them, all of the ones prior to last week. So I want to kind of bring us a little bit beyond these 4 cases. Now we have a bunch of copycat lawsuits. We have so many copycat lawsuits. We just had ones that were filed today, copycat lawsuits across the entire country now.
So does this have something to do with like the judicial precedence of these findings, especially at the federal level?
It has to do with, people. It has to do with attorneys have become emboldened because it's very important to understand these attorneys that are doing these class action lawsuits, these attorneys are not specific to real estate. They are career attorneys who focus on these types of lawsuits.
Big
right?
class action lawsuits where they can just go for really big findings, hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, so now there's blood in the water. The sharks are out.
Now there's blood in the water. Blood in the water, and then on a contingency. So they're getting, on average. So let's talk about industries where rates are common, right? So in that industry, these attorneys are getting 33% of this. So under treble damages, the verdict for the Sitzer lawsuit came back with over $5 billion, right? So over $5 billion.
That's just Missouri.
That's just Missouri. So
no offense to Missouri,
attorney,
we like Missouri. Show me.
So this attorney, on average, is going to pocket $1.7 billion from this. Right now, that's if all of this. Now, if in 3 years all of this settles, all the dust settles, this all happens, which I'll get to in a minute, because that's not. We'll talk about how I'm not going to give any opinions on that. We'll talk mutually about how likely it is that this is actually going to happen, right? That they're going to get the 5 point something billion. But we'll talk about all these. Let's talk about all these copycat lawsuits. Then there came Gibson, which was just filed. It was just filed in the last week. Now there's Batten 1, there's Batten 2, there's blood in the water, and these first of all, the attorney involved in that case, the Sitzer case, along with other attorneys, are now coming after this, right? I want to draw attention to one thing. The average
Colin says that's one hell of an ambulance they're chasing. Right
that's
there.
right. That's right. The average realtor in this country makes $47,000. That is how much the average realtor in this country makes. And that is to put food on the table. That is to be able to pay for housing, whether a rent or a mortgage. Those costs are going up. That's in order to be able to pay for the kids' childcare, babysitters when they're out working. That's to pay for everything. $47,000. And these lawsuits state that there has been collusion, that NAR and these large companies have colluded to keep realtor commissions high. And they often use the term cartel. Okay, they often use this term cartel. That these realtors, these 1.5 million realtors, they go into industry events and they all collude together to keep the commissions where they are, so they can make on average $47,000. That is what these lawsuits are basically saying. So let's go back to Sitzer. Okay,
Sounds kind of ridiculous when you put it that way, Brandon.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
I'm going to challenge you. But
Think?
what's the median income of realtors? Because there's a whole lot of people with a real estate license who don't do jack with it, or only like, sell houses for like their aunts,
Mhm.
but like there's a lot of folks out there that are doing well. I mean, the average is a bit misleading, but I get your point, right? You have a lot of working people out there that are working as real estate agents out here, and you're like, where's all the money like that they're supposedly making? Everybody's not, like the Netflix specials and everything with these folks, running around, so I get that.
The top realtors, Ben, just a little over 10% of realtors make over $100,000 a year. Just a little bit.
So now you're getting to my point. I mean, so there's still a lot. 90% of the industry
makes less than yes.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that even if we're talking 90, I mean, even the realtor who's out there hustling, they're not taking it to the bank. They're not out there flipping hundreds, right? On the way to, in their pocket. They're not carrying around busloads of money, right?
Yeah.
So these are working people. These are people that work for a living. These are people that are out there, and they're constantly out there advocating for their clients, whether they're buyers or whether they're sellers. Okay, so these lawsuits state that this whole industry, all these people, they've all colluded together in order to artificially inflate this on average $47,000 that they're making, or in your point, between 47,000 and 100,000, because you'd imagine that maybe the people that are working 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, they're probably making in between there. Maybe they are. It depends on the state, depends on the home prices, but maybe it's closer to that, right? But we're not talking something crazy. So going back to this Sitzer verdict, the verdict in the Sitzer trial, it's important to understand the legal system. So these federal courts, they're presided by a federal judge, and a jury of 8 folks. So it's not like a criminal trial where there's 12, it's 8 folks, okay? And because these trials, all of them, they involve class action, all of these, any verdict in any of these cases needs to be certified and approved by a judge because it involves class action. And then the non-prevailing party can actually appeal that verdict, and it goes to appellate court.
Non-prevailing being the loser.
Yes, the person who correct. The person
got to dumb it down for me, Brandon. Okay.
So it then goes to appellate court. When it goes to appellate court, there is no longer a jury. So appellate court is basically interpreting the law of the basis by which the law applies to that case and to that verdict.
So do we think when it goes to appellate court that the judge might maybe ratchet the damages down to a much smaller amount, or overturn it entirely?
So that can even happen now, because before it even gets there, this federal judge, Judge Stephen Boff, needs to certify the jury's verdict. This has not happened yet. Okay, this judge can do whatever he wants, basically, with this jury's verdict, and then offer or enforce an injunction. Right. So, what are we going to do because of this verdict? What are we going to do? What is the court going to do in order to right whatever the wrong is? Right. So we're still waiting that. We're not even at appeals yet. Although these companies involved in the suit, so NAR, first of all, the trade group, and Keller Williams and Home Services of America, they've all stated that they are going to appeal.
Yep.
And we're still waiting on the judge to certify the verdict and give the injunction, meaning what is the court going to do as a result of this. So that's what we're waiting on right now. Despite
and I got a question about this, because I also read somewhere, and help me make sure I'm clear on this. And By the way, if you're watching this right now, I want to know what you think. What questions do you have? What does this mean to you? I really want to know because we got some really smart people out there. Please get in there. We got Drew Phillips checking in. Drew's, got opinions from an RMC standpoint. I really want to know, how does this impact the relocation business, the RMC business? What do you think from a consumer standpoint? I really am curious what people are thinking out there. But I read something, Brandon. I read something about, was it Anywhere and maybe was it Remax?
It
So a
was
couple of
Remax.
these parties settled on this.
We're going to talk about
Sitzer.
that. Yeah, we're going to
Yeah,
talk
I
about
mean, was
that.
that the right move? And if it goes to appeals court, or if the judgment is overturned or whatever, does that affect those settlements that they?
No. So that's why parties settle, right?
Mhm.
Parties settle because they're getting ahead of that. They're getting ahead. They're admitting no wrongdoing. So Remax and Anywhere it came up with settlements. Remax 55 million. That 55 million applied to not only the Sitzer case, okay, which is 1.7 billion, and then over 5 billion with treble damages. Treble damages basically it's triple damages if you violate the Sherman antitrust law. It involves it's referred to as treble damages. So it's
This has
triple.
nothing to do with music, soprano, treble, alto. It means triple damages.
It's
Help me
triple
out. Dumb
damages,
it down
Ben.
for me. Okay,
Triple
thank you.
damages. On the
Okay.
next case, the Merle case, that is the next one to be tried in early 2024. That is for over 13 billion against the
These
original
numbers are
5.
silly. These numbers are so
You're crazy.
silly. No, I
They're
can't even
crazy. If
wrap
you
my
look at,
brain around
they're
13
crazy.
billion.
If you look at how much these companies are making in net profit or revenue each year, these numbers are crazy, okay, compared to how much these companies are actually making at the end of the year. Now, if you
And I want to also be clear here too, just for everybody that doesn't know, because I didn't know this until very recently. Anywhere that Brandon is referring to, Anywhere, the company Anywhere, is the new name for
really,
Realogy, right? Realogy.
Mhm.
So you're probably familiar with Realogy, which is, I think it's the Coldwell Banker, the Citrus 21, some of the various brands right out there in the space. So
That's right.
just so you know who that is.
That's
And
right.
Don's saying two firms settled out of court for 140 million. Does that sound correct?
So that is Remax and Anywhere. Remax's settlement was for 55 million. Anywhere's settlement was for 83 million. That referred to both Sitzer and Merle and the Nasala case. Okay, Nasala case being the one in Massachusetts against the Massachusetts MLS. What's very unique about this is that the Massachusetts MLS is not owned by the National Association of Realtors. It is not owned. It is a broker-owned MLS. However, they adopted a similar rule to that of the National Association of Realtors, where you must offer at least 1 penny. Okay. Now
Okay.
now Ben. So just to touch on Merle, early 2024, that's going to go to trial, and involves all those states we talked about, and with treble damages, that's now 40 billion. Okay, so the first one 5 billion, this one 40 billion. Then these cases have kept adding up since last week. Now you have Gibson, now you have Batten 1, now you have Batten 2.
Whoever Batten is, by the way, Batten 2. Now is there a Batten? Is it like Rocky? How many Battens are there? It's like John Wick over here.
You tell me.
That's a lot.
Now here's the thing. So all 3 of these cases prior to this week that you would hear about, Sitzer, Merle, and Nasalik, all 3 of them, the plaintiffs and the defendants have entered into these settlement agreements. Okay. So meaning the plaintiffs are happy with the settlement, or at least happy enough to enter into it.
They're taking the money. Yeah.
They're taking the money and they're agreeing to a certain result to come. It's not just about, supposedly, it's not just about the money. It's also they want to see the following changes to happen in the industry. So not only Sitzer and Merle, which were settled by Remax and Anywhere, but also Nasalik. So the result of all three match a certain result, right? A certain result that both sides are happy with, and that is the following. The first one is that buyer broker commissions, before they were 1 penny, now they can be 0. Okay. All three of them affirm that. They're not saying that they want to see these settlement agreements are not agreeing to anything like decoupling of commissions, meaning buyer broker commissions and seller broker commissions are going to be paid completely separately. They're not saying anything like that. They're not saying that all this needs to go away. The industry needs to completely revamp, that the industry is going to completely change. They are just saying that now instead of 1 penny, you must offer $0. They are
All right,
also
so I got a question. All right, they're also saying what? Finish that thought.
They're also saying that you cannot, and no realtor does this anyway, because of the code of ethics, realtors cannot do this anyway. So it's just, I mean, it's redundant in some aspects because any ethical realtor does this anyway. You cannot doesn't do this anyway. You cannot sort listings based on how much they offer as a buyer broker commission. That is the second thing.
Does that filter sort functionality
I've never
exist
seen
in
that
the
filter.
MLS?
No, not any of the ones we use, but it's sort of saying that this
sick
is
filter.
now. I've never seen this filter.
Just kidding. I mean, but I could see why people would do that. I could see why people would sort. I mean, they sort by home price, they sort by, things like that. I mean,
but
I
it's
can
not
see
there.
how that information's out there. If it's in the MLS, how it could be used nefariously. But I see what you're saying. Your point really is like it's such a inconsequential change to go from a penny minimum to a zero minimum. But I got to tell you, based on the ripple effects it's sending through the industry that I'm hearing about from a practical standpoint, I mean, forget the crazy billions of dollars in damages that are being awarded here and what that might do to the solvency, frankly, of the companies being sued, which I can recklessly speculate all I want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing a lot of waves that tend to indicate to me that this might actually have some real practical implications to our industry. And I want to talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
We've got people checking in here. Janet Turner, Brandon, so well informed. She's impressed. See why he's your guest. She had doubts, but now she's like, yo, checks out. Brandon's the guy. This is great. People are checking in. Karen Gerba, super informative, great recap. Karen, I'd love to know what you think about all this here. People are just catching up for old times. That's lovely. John, this is interesting. This gets right to the point here. Get in the comments. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking. In fact, before we get to John, Drew said something about McDonald's. That always gets my attention. Said McDonald's, Burger King, and all like are cartels and have colluded all these years.
Exactly
well,
right.
Listen, if I drive down the street and everybody's got a dollar menu, it might be collusion. Just saying. All right. Yeah, Drew likes the fries. I gotcha. But it could also just be competition. It could just be what the market is. You talk about common compensation and stuff, right? If somebody's selling something for $1, I'll sell it for $1, and we'll compete on quality, right? John right. Saying the RMC's majority revenue is home sell, home purchase. How does this impact? Let's get to the real meat of this for our audience, because we do tend to skew relocation here, right? It's Love and Relo.
That's right.
For goodness sake. Hit that like button, by the way. Feel free to reshare this so people out there know we're talking about it. But what implication, in your opinion, Brandon, does this have on RMCs?
So Ben, this kind of the last few parts of these settlement agreements, this is a really great leeway into this part of it. So there's two more things that these settlement agreements said. One of them is that you must disclose to sellers that they are not required to offer a buyer agent commission, which before they had to offer a penny, now they're not required to offer anything at all. And the final thing that these things say is that, and especially this is more prevalent in the Nisalic, the Massachusetts case, is that if a buyer broker gets an offer from a seller of compensation, okay, and the buyer broker counters that offer of compensation, now the buyer broker compensation is negotiable between the buyer, the seller, the buyer broker, and the seller broker. Get that? So this has always been negotiable.
Let me restate this back to you. I want to restate this back to you. So if I go to you and I say, Brandon, I'm going to say you're my buyer agent, because I would use nobody else in Boston, frankly. You're my buyer agent. And I say, and you're like, hey, Ben, our standard is 3%. And I'm like, yeesh, times are tough, Brandon. I don't know, man. I mean, love you. I think you're amazing. But can we do 2.5? If you respond to that negotiation and say, you know what, best I could do is 2.75, do you a solid, you're my buddy, quarter point, it's best I could do, just, I like to role play. And so, and I'm like, and so now you responding now opens this conversation up to the seller's agent as well to hop in on this and
Ben,
weigh in.
it's you're actually getting into the next leeway, which is a really good, really good leeway, which is actually buyer agency agreements. But let's take it one step back. What this is saying is that when a seller offers a commission in the MLS, so in this case MLS pin, let's say it says 2.5%, or let's say it says 1.5%, okay, and the buyer broker counters and says, but I would like a 1.5% commission at this price that this buyer is offering. Okay. That this price. So the house is $1 million. The house is $1 million. And the seller is saying, I'm offering a 1.5% commission. The buyer and the buyer broker write an offer and they say, we are offering $990. And we want a 2.5% commission for this buyer broker. Now it is all negotiable. It is all negotiable. So the counter, the buyer broker and the buyer, because the buyer broker can only, buyer agent or buyer broker can only send an offer that the buyer has signed on, right? So they've signed off on it. They are now sending this offer, and now it all becomes negotiable. So it's all laid out there. This is really important, Ben. Why is this so important? It's because it's the leeway into the next segment of this, which is how is this going to affect RMCs? How is this going to affect not just RMCs, but corporate clients? And what can RMCs and corporate clients do to get ahead of this? So we talked about extremes, right? One extreme is that through all these cases, buyer broker and seller broker commissions are decoupled, meaning it becomes a law. It becomes a law. It becomes ingrained that these two things have to be paid separately. The buyer pays their own commission. The seller pays their own commission. Buyers can no longer get representation without having to pay out of pocket or in some
All right,
other
I'm
way.
sorry. I want to make sure I'm catching this. I always thought the seller paid both the buyer and the seller's commission. When did that change?
Well, so good point. So that's the purpose of these lawsuits, right? The purpose of these lawsuits is that the seller shouldn't have been required to pay the buyer and the seller agent's commission. Now, one thing, the most extreme outcome of these lawsuits, that's the thing that everybody is chatting about, right? Because this would completely change everything, would be the decoupling of the buyer and the seller commission. This is the most extreme outcome that can come from all of this, meaning it becomes a judge makes it federal law. The Department of Justice intervenes and puts in a direct order that sellers, even if sellers want to pay the buyer broker commission because they want more traffic, they want more exposure, they want a free and competitive marketplace where brokers bring in these buyers into their homes, and therefore they're able to net what they want to net with market values. And in addition to this, buyers get this representation. The most extreme thing that could happen as a result of this is that federal court or the Department of Justice comes back and says, you can no longer do this. Even if you want to, you can no longer do this. Now, Ben, even if you want to.
This is crazy. So let me just, I'm going to paraphrase this in real terms, right? So say I'm moving up to Boston. Boston's a little higher cost of living area, and I want to buy that $1 million house we're hypothetically speaking about, right? And maybe I've only got like 50 grand to put down on this house, which is a 5%, down payment. I know everybody's gonna eat me alive in the comments. Oh, you should always do 20, whatever. Okay. Find a great mortgage provider to underwrite this thing. I put my 50 grand down, and now boom, I got to go find a premier buyer's agent who's going to get 3% which is another 30 grand that you're saying I have to foot 30 grand out of my pockets. And I need to bring 80 to the table when I was just going to skate by with a little 5% down payment. I got to now essentially effectively bring 8%, 3 for the buyer's agent, 5% for my down payment. I mean, I got to think this is going to be really onerous for a lot of buyers and put purchasing. It could be the margin that puts purchasing a home out of reach for a lot of
Out of
people.
reach. Out of reach. And Ben, you bring up a really good point. I want to talk about DE&I. Okay. So who is going to be negatively impacted from this? There is a vast racial discrepancy in home ownership in this country. Okay. And who's going to be impacted by this? This is going to further augment this disparity. This is going to affect veterans who are doing 0% down veteran loans. You can't forget about the veterans. Friday's Veterans Day. You can't forget about that. You can't forget
because there's VA loan programs that are 0% down veterans get into
down
a house. And now instead of 0%, now it's going to be like plus the 3% you got to pay the buyer's agent.
Correct. And who else? Low income buyers that no longer can receive representation as part of this. This is why this breakdown has worked so well.
Here's another one. It's going to first time home buyers, because if I'm selling $1 million house and I have the proceeds of that transaction, it's a lot easier for me now to fund my down payment and the buyer's agent commission.
That's right.
But if I'm not coming out of a house I have equity in and I'm making my first foray into the market, that's going to be really hard for me.
That's exactly right. And that's why, as an inquiry by the Department of Justice is there to protect those who cannot protect themselves, the vulnerable, right? So we're talking about the vulnerable being even more affected by such a change than anyone else, right? Because the person buying the $5 million home, they can afford to flip a certain, a 2.5%, 3% buyer broker commission. That person that we just talked about, that's going to negatively impact the progress that we have made as a society on DE&I and are continuing to work towards making, it is going to negatively impact this, right?
It's interesting that you say this too, because I read an article that says this might be the last generation of homeowners in our country. Home ownership used to be kind of the pathway and the cornerstone of the American dream, right? It used to be the biggest portion of wealth was your, in your home, and you would buy, you buy a home, you'd stay in it for a long time, you develop equity, you'd leverage that to make other investments and do other things, right? And it was home ownership was really a big part of the American dream. And it's not that way around the world. It's not that way in Europe. It's not that way necessarily in Asia or other parts of the world, right? But it is here.
100%.
And now with foreign investment, with increased interest rates, with the fact that, frankly, the starter home doesn't really exist anymore in a lot of ways, right? And now with this buyer's commission, situation. I mean, it could, this could just be, this could be a lot of things. I want to get to the comments here. Get in the comments. I want to hear what you're thinking. Are we crazy? Is this situation crazy? What's going on here? I want to know. Travis, also a veteran, thank you for your service. Says he's selling a house now. He's responsible to pay both commissions. Travis, what's the commission rates? I'm really curious. Let me know. Drew Phillips says you guys are 100% on point. All these judgments do is really damage the first time and vulnerable buyers' ability to buy. Drew, I'd love to hear what you're seeing from an RMC standpoint. Susie says, preach, Brandon. She's getting religion in the comments. You are so right. We have to remember that negatively impacting buyers directly impacts the traditional path to wealth in this country. Hey, there you go. Keep in mind that this backwards path on our progress towards improved opportunity for the vulnerable continues, with this being one spoke in that wheel. And to be honest, I mean, the vulnerable, I mean, I don't consider myself a vulnerable person or a low income buyer or anything, but I mean, I'm renting currently and I want to buy. Right. And so selfishly, I mean, I think about my own circumstance, right? I'm buying into, probably a larger
American dream.
home,
You're buying into the American dream.
But at a high interest rate with no equity coming in, and now potentially having to also eat the buyer's commission. It's interesting. Go ahead.
Well, Ben, I want to, and Susie touches on this, and you just touched on this majorly, Ben, is that this is the American dream. So this whole argument, okay, in Australia, the buyer pays their commission, the buyer broker commission, and the seller pays the seller agent commission, right? This whole argument is so we want to be like another country. We don't want to be American. We don't want to embrace the American dream of building wealth in this manner. So why are you making it? Why even come up in a scenario where people feel that their path to building wealth, their path to becoming successful in that manner is being, in some ways, it's being attacked. So why do you want to even bring up this argument? Okay, this is how they do it in some countries in Europe. This is how they do it in Australia. We're not Europe. We're not Australia. We're America. This is how it's been since the early 1900s, and this is how people have been able to be successful.
I would love to, if anyone can do the research for us. I'd love to see home ownership rates by country. I'd love to know kind of where the US has ranked. I think it's obviously going down, but I'd love to know where the US ranks from a home ownership per capita standpoint here. This is really interesting. Listen, and philosophically, you tell me that now, commissions are negotiable on both sides, and that doesn't necessarily feel like a bad thing. I know that pinches realtors who aren't doing as well as we think they're doing based on, Sell It Like Sunset or whatever, out there on Netflix, right? But I don't necessarily automatically disagree with that. But you're telling me that already exists. It's the decoupling aspect where I feel like the buyer is going to really have to foot the bill for this, and they're not the one experiencing the windfall of the sale. And also, is this going to be something that's going to be able to be funded through a mortgage? Or am I going to be able to get a mortgage for the closing costs, if you will, associated with the buyer's agent commission?
You currently cannot. Currently, and you bring up a really great point, Ben, is that you currently cannot do that. Lending laws do not allow you to do that. You can roll it into the sale price, however. So, for example, if that home is not offering a buyer broker commission, or it's a for sale by owner, and you have a buyer agency, you are a buyer, you have a buyer agency agreement. This brings us to the next part of this, which is what can we do as an industry to get ahead of anything that may happen. You have a buyer agency agreement, which states that you get representation, you get led to a wise decision on the most important investment that you are ever going to make in your life, in the vast majority of cases. You use you use an expert buyer agent to buy your home. You have a buyer agency agreement with them, which clearly outlines that agent has your back. They are out there to serve your best interest. And in order for that person to be able to do that, that person gets compensated. That agency gets compensated 2.5% when you think about appreciation, Ben, you think about some of these places that appreciated 20-30% per year during the last 3 years. Okay, 20-30%. There are places where people bought homes for $500,000 in 2020, and now they're selling them for $1 million. There are places like that, and there are many places like that. Okay, so if you had to pay someone 2.5%, okay, so 12,000, not someone, but a company that has all these overhead costs, in order to lead you to this financial decision, this wise decision that allowed you to double your net worth. It is what this does for you is that this allows you to be able to compensate this person. So buyer agency agreements. So we need to make sure moving forward that buyer agency agreements are becoming more and more used. They outline services, and it outlines how people are going to be paid. But I want to talk about, just for real quick, I want to talk about TRID. So 2015 TRID laws came into place. And what these laws did is that they were further disclosure. So what do all these settlement agreements, what do they all have in common? It is further disclosure. So yes, the most extreme case here could be the decoupling of commissions. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be the most extreme outcome here, because you look at these settlement agreements and you see that both parties were happy in a world where sellers do not have to pay. However, if they so choose, they will pay. And there is further disclosure about this. So that's disclosure. That's the name of the game. That's the name of real estate. I think that ultimately, once the dust settles, I think this is the direction this is going in. And I think disclosure is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agreed on disclosure and transparency, right? Drew saying corporations will adopt policy and cover the costs. Okay. RMC networks will disclose and figure it out. But your first time veteran and diverse buyers will feel the hurt. Yeah. Interesting.
100%.
Corinne saying first time buyers also sustain the rest of the industry. We rely on the first time buyers to upsize. So those next set of home owners can upsize. Yeah, there's a chain reaction. For sure there. Speaking of chain reactions, John says, when the courts make decisions, they have yet to learn of the downstream impact. Interesting. Non-part. What's up, Non? Good friend of the show. Has a question. Do you see Fannie Mae will roll out policies to offset the challenges?
It's possible. That's certainly been the buzz here, is that buyer broker commissions, if they are paid by buyers, may, they may come out with something that says those are financeable. I mean, that's been ever since these suits started coming to a boil several months ago. That has been the discussion. Now, that's yet to be seen. The reason that's yet to be seen, Ben, is because, Anand, is that we don't know where this is going. We don't know that where does this eventually end up? In Washington State, for 1 year now, they have had the ability in their MLS, and Corinne can talk about this. She can talk about this for hours. She can talk about this much better than I can. For 1 year now, they've had the ability to offer $0 commissions. And what has this done? This has made it, certainly so, that some people may choose to do this, but 95% have not chosen to do this. Despite having the choice to do this, they have not done that. These sellers have not done this. Why have they not done this? Because they want the traffic, they want the exposure, they want the marketing of their home, they want buyer brokers, buyer agents to bring these buyers, and ultimately they have deciphered that it is good for the buyers as well to have
it's
that
more competitive. I mean, frankly,
it's more
it sounds
competitive.
like if they deem it to be more competitive
It's
to
more
pay that. Just like,
competitive.
I mean, it's really, in a way, it kind of becomes almost like a seller concession to say, like, listen, I'm going to pay for this because I feel like it's what it's going to take to sell this house. But we
100%.
also know how vulnerable seller concessions can be when markets change.
Mhm.
And it would be really disadvantageous for the entire real estate market, which really, I mean, to your point, there's 100, what do you say, 1.5 million, realtors out there.
Mhm.
And if we start, like, if all of a sudden, like, people's like ability to make commissions oscillates with the ups and the downs of the market, it might become an untenable career path for people.
That's right.
Really interesting. Adrian Grimes, shout out to Adrian doing the research over here. Stats and information. Grimes, we call him, in the building here. It looks like I was wrong. Fairly high. Is a lot of Asian countries up here, fairly high with home ownership rates here. Looks like we trail Russia and Sudan, and we don't like to be in that position. But it looks like I'm missing a lot of South American countries. Looks like we exceed Canada, interestingly, Mexico, our neighbors to the north and south. Very interesting. Thank you, Adrian, for that. Travis gave us a real life example on the curve. My agent just lowered his commissions to 2%, reduced the buyer broker commission to 2.5 to offset a drop in price to capture more showings.
There you go. Negotiable. They've always been negotiable.
Yeah. Drew says, my guys, we've been preparing for this over 2 years, educating our network on using buyer broker comp agreements articulating value and the fiduciary responsibility. This new way is already a way in many of our states. This will be regionally market driven and will be all still negotiable in total. But here's the thing. Let me ask you this. We talked about brokers. We talked about brokers agents.
Mhm.
What is the definition of an RMC in that transaction?
On the purchase side.
Sure.
So on the purchase side, as you know, Ben, the RMCs they give the referral to their to the people in their network, the brokers in their network that are the
So they
best.
are not the broker of record in that transaction.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
They refer a broker to the transferees that are moving.
Is that considered co-broking or co-brokering?
No, it's considered a referral. It is
Just
not
a referral.
considered co-broking at all. Yeah.
Is their portion of the commission, because it is percentage based, so
Mhm.
it's percentage of a percentage, is their
Mhm.
percentage of that percentage negotiable at all or in jeopardy from this?
It certainly can be if there is if this
Is there an
decouple.
onus to disclose it?
Well, referral fee agreements are by and large confidential agreements. Referral fee agreements are confidential. Um, and here's the thing, and John, and what John is saying, let's go with this. Keep in mind, there's also these costs, these referral fees. They're meant to offset costs of this move. And many RMCs also engage in profit sharing with the corporate client, which allows them to give these robust packages. Okay. So all of this works hand in hand. All of this works together. There's synergy, there's collaboration in order for this to happen. So so this is kind of the thread we've been going to this entire conversation is that let's say, okay, this extreme, the decoupling of commissions does not happen. However, in some markets, as Drew mentioned, there's a percentage that's large enough of houses that do not offer a buyer broker commission. Again, decoupling does not happen. However, because of the new disclosure, because of the direction things are going in, there's a percentage that's large enough to impact of houses that do not offer this buyer broker commission. Now, what do we do about this? So we already talked about buyer agency agreements, right? But the second part of this is really you have to, just like anything, Ben, you have to have a value proposition. The value proposition in this is what is the value of the buyer broker, especially in relocation? What is the value of the buyer broker?
I mean, a lot of people say the buyer broker works harder than the seller. They're out
In
there
most
going and doing all these
markets,
showings and like running ragged and
that's
putting
right.
in 30 different offers, especially in
That's
these
right.
super competitive times.
That's
Everybody
right.
wants the sellers. They just want to, hey, spruce this up, declutter here. We'll get the photographer in, no problem. We'll list it on a Thursday, and then we'll sit back and wait for the offers to come in. I mean, this
100%.
is obviously an oversimplification for someone who's
Mhm.
never done either of these jobs. But the buyer seems to be running ragged. They're sweating their butt off in July. Like, okay, the 10th showing of the day. Now, this one, I think you're really gonna like this one, and they're just getting run ragged out there. So, I mean, I feel bad for those buyers agents.
The 10th showing of the day, and this is the 10th day of showings. I mean, literally, this is these folks that supposedly have colluded. This is what they put into this. This is not you show a couple homes and you're done and you get paid this big check. And this is also an industry where you are not guaranteed to even make a penny. You only make a penny if somebody buys or they sell. A lot of these buyer agents, keep in mind, they do a fantastic job, and the buyer does not buy. He or she or they do not buy.
And that buyer is also, they're kicking a large portion up to their broker, who's also got staff, administrative staff, technology costs, licensing for
Rent,
being on the MLS, rent, overhead, marketing
marketing,
fees,
mhm,
tremendous amount of things like that. So there's a
management.
ton of overhead there. We got some really great comments coming in. I want to prioritize these comments here. Travis says, I think you'll see developers go from building new homes, which we need. We need a lot of new homes. Inventory is way down. to more multifamily dwellings, townhomes, condos, apartments that are rentable moving forward. Input from his father, who was a developer for many years. Very interesting. I don't think we'd like to see that. I think we would like to see still the continued construction of single family homes, in my opinion. Josh over here from Prime Lending. What's up, Josh? Josh is on a $450,000 purchase with 20% down and assuming a 3% commission financed into the loan at 8%. You won't pay that off until year 4 of the loan. Sweet. So if you don't, I mean, you're upside down on the freaking buyer's commission for 4 years. Oh, geez. Please. Okay, here we go. This is great. Homeowner stats globally are in flux. The high interest rate concern is not a U.S. concern. In Europe and Canada, we are finding fewer folks with an appetite to buy. Very interesting. Nan says the next question would be if there could be tax breaks around additional costs. Does that make any sense to you, Brandon?
So yes, what he's saying is because the seller agent commission, it's whatever the seller is paying, that doesn't count against what they're profiting from the house, right? There's a threshold that is not deductible, but beyond that, you would owe capital gains tax. So what he's saying is that if now the buyer is paying, would that be tax deductible? Because currently the commission to the seller is tax deductible against what they purchased the home for versus what they're selling it for. So this is certainly one of the big, these are one of the big questions that have come about all of this for sure.
Okay, interesting here. We got a lot going on here. We filled up an hour. We haven't even
broken the iceberg.
There's so much going on here.
Then one thing I really do want to say is that one of the most important benefits that companies offer their employees is that home purchase benefit. Okay. That is what ingrains someone in a community when they move there. It is what once they are happy in that community, once they are ingrained in the community, they start becoming involved in that community. They have a home, they bought a home, their families becomes involved. That is what ingrains them, and then they can become ingrained in that company's culture and in that works culture. So this home purchase benefit, in my opinion, is one of the most important benefits the companies offer their employees in relocation. And it's
a really good point.
And it's really important now to start having these conversations within RMCs and with corporate clients about why this needs to continue and how, if we get to a situation where an exception is needed or a miscellaneous allowance is needed to cover this cost, that this is utilized, that this exception is granted and this buyer broker commission is granted, just like in some policies, rental fee assistance is covered.
Well, I mean, Drew's over here saying, maybe we should gross up the buyer broker commission covered in the policy, just like household goods. Corinne is say deductible moving expenses, which is on the docket to come back up for discussion. So you need to be talking about all of these deductible moving and relocation expenses. People are loving the information here. Fantastic. Got some more questions in here, including stuff about karate, which is great. Yes. Corinne, home purchase benefits are on important. Yeah. You make a great point though, right? I mean, relocating, for a job is a huge commitment. Buying a house is an even bigger one. Settling down, nesting in that area, it's a great retention tool. I agree with everything you said there. I want to do a lightning round real quick of overrated, underrated. You got to give the people what they want. All right. I know we're over time here. Okay. I know you're giving me a very reasonable hourly rate right now, Brandon. So I appreciate that. Okay.
It's negotiable, Ben.
Everything's negotiable.
Yes.
One penny for you, Brandon. Okay. No,
right.
Just kidding. Let's hop into overrated, underrated. Do you know how to play the game, Brandon?
Maybe you can give me a refresher.
Sure. There's 2 rules, Brandon. 2 rules. You ready? First rule. I'm going to give you a topic. You tell me it's either overrated or underrated. Okay.
That's right.
Second rule. I tell you if you're right.
Okay.
Here we go. Overrated, underrated. All right. That's what you say. First one. Reality TV, overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
All right, you're right. You're right. It is overrated. Specifically real estate reality TV. Do you feel any differently?
I do not feel differently. That is not how it goes. That is not how it happens.
Worst reality TV show about the real estate industry.
They're all bad, Ben. They're
Okay, least bad reality TV show about the real estate industry. Gun to your head, you got to watch one right now. What is it?
the flip shows, because you can start getting ideas for what to do. I would say
Yeah.
that's probably the best.
Yeah. So you know what? Everybody agrees with you. All right, that was a softball. That was a softball here. Scotty Chappie. Is that a thing? I don't even know. It's Scotty or it's Chappie, but it's not Scotty Chappie. I'm sorry. You're here. Thank you so much. All right, let's go. Scott loves the blue background. You're right. All right, let's go here. Overrated, underrated. Antiques Roadshow.
So underrated.
Is this show still on the air?
Yes, it is, and I watch it on my PBS app, which $5 a month. I think everybody should get it, and it is the most soothing thing to watch because of the people's voices that are on it, and I love looking at the reactions when people find out they have a $100,000 shoe in their closet.
They're like, this was my granddaddy's shoe, and
That's
he always kept it on the mantle, and I never knew it was George Washington's. Like, ma'am, this stamp on the heel that you could barely see right here indicates this was cobbled in 1765. Yeah, it is fun. And do you know how much? Do you have any idea how much it's worth? Yeah, it is fun.
One penny.
Well, my real estate buyer told me throw it in with the transaction. All right, let's see here. This is great. Corinne says, yes, Brandon, $100,000 shoe. For real, we're in the wrong business. You know what? This is a lot of fun. There's something about just like a Saturday afternoon, flip on the old road show, see a bunch of old people show up to the convention center in nowhere USA and get a bid on a family heirloom. I like it. I do like it. I'll be honest with you. Something about it. You ever have an antique that you take there? I see a couple pictures on the wall. Are those Civil War era paintings?
Yeah. I got a few antiques. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what they're worth?
You know what? I got to do the Antiques Roadshow. We'll find out.
If you could go on the Antiques Roadshow, Brandon Tabassi, what would you bring? Put it in the comments. I want to know right now, what is the one item in your home that you would go to the Antiques Roadshow? If we have the Antiques Roadshow show up to the next WERC event in DC, what is the one item? I'm going to get a Glomo booth, okay? And we're going to have the Antiques Roadshow. We're going to have and you have to have 6 experts because you need a painting guy, you need a sculpture person, you need a, Asian vases from, the Ming Dynasty. What is the one thing you're bringing? Brandon, what are you bringing?
Ben, I can't. These my cowboy boots. I have these antique cowboy boots. I will bring, even though I'm from Massachusetts, I'm a New Englander. I have these antique cowboy boots. I want to find out how much they're worth.
Were these like John Wayne's boots? Like
we'll see. That's what the guy on the Antiques Roadshow is going to tell me. So we're going to see.
He's going to take one whiff and be like, Gene Autry. Love it. Drew says Grammy sewing machine. I had a Grammy too. That's fantastic. I love it. Look at this. Josh hawking the family heirlooms. Don't do it. You don't need them all though, Josh. I mean, somebody dies, they have a whole house. What do you got? 2 whole houses now? I mean, you gotta do something. You know what I mean? John saying his shoes. There we go. Closest we came is a pair of cowboy spurs. We paid $30 for, and they're worth $800. Janet, how did you find out? Do you have any idea what they're worth? This is great. Okay, this is fun. We're having fun here, people. All right, next one up. Instagram and TikTok. You're lumping them together, which leads me to believe you will say
way overrated. It brings people out of the moment. I am a big proponent of living in the moment, Ben, because you cannot get that moment back. So if you are busy taking a picture of yourself or the surroundings, you cannot fully live that moment.
Brandon, how old were you when you had the opinions of a 65-year-old?
That is exactly what my assistant said when she read my answer. She said, "They're going to think that you are a square." And
Brandon, newly retired Brandon Tabassi of Remax Relocation Partners. This is great. Of course, everyone's hopping on the overrated train because everyone on LinkedIn hates TikTok. I've already established this. We know this. Janet says, "Hey, watch it on the 65-year-old comment." Yeah, Janet, that's fine. I got you. I got you. Janet, surprise me. Instagram, TikTok, overrated, underrated. Put it in the comments. Wow me. Here's the deal, man. I'm with you. I'm an old man too. I turned 40 last year. I'm officially an old man. Um, I think there is so much value in TikTok. Now, is there a lot of trash on there? A lot of stuff that's just designed to keep you in the scroll. It's like get you in the matrix for like 3 hours. You wake up, you got like a 5 o'clock shadow. You're like, where am I? I'm hungry. Where am I? Yeah, 100% for sure. You get trapped in there. We got to find ways to like break that, addiction. But there's something about the way that you can take a somewhat complex idea, like what we just talked about, for
Mhm,
instance, and distill that down to a 30-second punchy video where
mhm.
someone leaves with a generally good understanding of that topic. There's something about distilling information from long form to short form that I think is absolutely magical about TikTok. And I think there's a real attention arbitrage possibility out there to take TikTok style videos and put them into spaces like the one we're in and LinkedIn,
Mhm.
WERC, et cetera, to make information more consumable and to boost engagement. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. So is it overrated, underrated? I mean, it's hard to say. It's underrated, right?
Why don't we just
Um,
put it neutral? Can we agree? Can we agree on that?
no, I would rather die, honestly. We're not going neutral. Remember rule number one? You have two options.
Okay.
Okay. Um, I'm gonna say I'm just feeling, you know what? I'm an old man too, so that makes me feel I'm a little spiteful right now. And I'm gonna say you're wrong, Brandon. I think it's underrated. For people like us. For the kids, it's overrated. For people like us, I think it's underrated. And it's my show, so I get to be right.
Okay.
I like it. John says 40 is not old. I know, but it's the mentality. Corinne says, Brandon, you're my favorite square.
Thank
Love
you.
it.
I appreciate it.
Drew says, just make a dance to it. You could do relocation policies with gross ups for the buyer broker commission and do a dance to it. It'll be a trend. Growing wise means learning what to put your energy into, what to walk away from. Josh, interesting. I appreciate you spending an hour with me, Josh. Let's go next. You're 2 for 3 here. Cruises.
For me, they
I
are
love this.
very,
This is such an old man take right here. Tell me underrated.
so for me, they're very overrated
Oh,
because I am the type of person that I want to discover. I think for me,
okay.
discovery is the biggest thing. And for me to plan that European vacation every step of the way, and how I'm going to get there with what train, and where I'm going to get the rental car, and where I'm going to go for dinner, and where I'm going to stay at this hotel. That for me, that's part of the excitement. That's part of the thrill of doing it. So for a cruise, for me, it's too easy. And I'm somebody that
That's too
I
true.
don't like too easy. For me, that's too easy.
Yeah, and you don't get the opportunity to immerse yourself, right? You get to like jump off over here. You do
Right.
like Bahamas for like, 6 hours. You got to jump back on, right? So you
Mhm.
don't really get to immerse. I totally dig that. I'm going to throw one at you, though. What do you think about this idea? I heard this, and I'm going to give this full credit. It goes to Ben Shiner. He's from the UK.
Okay.
He told me this at IAM. We may or may not have been drinking. I don't remember. Point being is, what do you think about a conference on a cruise?
You know, is it an ERC on a cruise? What kind
Yes,
of
yes,
conference?
a WERC with a little RDC action in it on a
I would
cruise
do
ship.
it. I would dig it because honestly, the reason I love this industry, it's the people on it. I would love to be on a cruise boat with so many people that I really truly consider friends. So that is something that I would do 100%.
And it would keep us closer, I think, because I think one
Mhm.
of the problems with WERC, right, is we could tend to splinter off into all our own little dinners and parties and
Right.
shindigs, right, whatever. And this keeps everybody kind of more so together, I think, a little
Mhm.
bit. I mean, boats are still
Mhm.
big, but you know what I mean? It keeps everybody together a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And you get the global mobility aspect because you can go to other countries and get a little boom excursion, come
That's
back
right.
on, boom, get some learning, boom excursion, another country, boom, come back on, get some learning. We'll
That's right.
learn while we're at sea. We'll jump off and party in, another country.
It's gonna be an ERC Viking cruise. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Fantastic. Let me know what you think. Josh says brilliant idea. Actually, he says actually like he's surprised and unaccustomed to good ideas on the show. I appreciate that, Josh. John's in on it. Yes. Drew says do it
Let's
now.
go.
Let's go. Look at this. Scott says underrated. Let go. Just let go. Look at this. Drew says, where's Anapom? You got to tag him. You got to tag him. Tag Anapom. Let's see here. When you buy that, listen, John, I don't know if you know how these things work. You don't actually buy the boat. You just Karen. This is great. All right. Do we have another one? Company culture, overrated or underrated?
Underrated, of course. There's
That
nothing
was
more important than a
softball.
company culture.
True or false? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
So true.
Yeah. What was that? Drucker? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, company culture. But what does company culture mean? I feel like it's like one of those overused words like communication. What does it mean?
I'd say the values of that company and how people physically in their presence being in that company, how they manifest those values. That's to me, that's company culture.
Yeah, I also like company culture being what people do when the boss isn't around, so to speak, right? Like, what do we do if left to our own devices? Who are we really?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, listen, somebody get in the comments if you got a hot take. Company culture is overrated. I would love to hear about it. I'd love dissenting opinions here, but yeah, this one's a pretty easy under. So I think you know what I think you're 3 for 5 today. I'll be honest with
I
you.
thought I was four, wasn't I four? No,
I
because you.
think we disagreed on the cruise
Okay. All
also.
right. Okay.
And when pressed, I had to go against you on the TikTok, Instagram.
So wait a minute. This is one where I'm
You're graded
scoring based on how many
100,000
times we.
percent.
I didn't
Yeah.
know the rules of the.
It's
I would have picked
no,
other. I would have picked other questions.
time out. Brandon, this is recorded, so you can go back and watch the tape. But there were 2 rules,
Uh
Brandon.
huh.
The first one's you have to tell me if it's overrated or underrated,
Uh
which you almost broke the first rule. The second one
huh.
is I get to tell you if you're right or wrong. It's not fair. It's not fair. I know.
Right.
No, it's not fair. No, Brandon, you've been a great sport. I'm obviously just this is tongue in cheek, but thank you so much. This was one of the most informative frankly, real estate educational pieces that I've ever been to.
Thanks,
So
Ben.
thank you so much for just opening up that brain and just giving us all that's in there regarding this. This is truly
Thank you.
impactful. And Brandon, you want to leave us with maybe a final thought before we sign off?
Uh, I would say that we talked about earlier, communication is key to everything. I think as we move forward in this, we need to continue to communicate and continue to keep our eye on the ball.
Yeah. Well, there's some cliches for you. I like it. Let's communicate and keep our eye on the ball. Go Sox. This is great. Brandon Tabassi, this is fantastic. Remax Partners Relocation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ben.
Awesome, y'all. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You guys are amazing. Oh, geez. Sorry, I ended up throwing that producer Adam. Adam, my bad. I didn't mean nothing by it. I think I'm Tony Reality sometimes. Thanks for being here. Hit that like button again. Appreciate all of you being here and stay tuned for the next one.